It's exactly 8 o'clock. You're watching News Hour on SABC3. Good evening, welcome.
Good evening and welcome. Let's take a look at the news tonight. African leaders salute the old, making way for the new.
In the debate tonight, we ask, what are the political and economic consequences of the escalating land invasions?
And Venus Williams secures her second Wimbledon title. On with our main story. All eyes are on Africa as the continent bids farewell to the OAU and welcomes in the African Union.
53 African heads of state have flown into the Zambian capital Lusaka to oversee the smooth transition of the OAU to the AU, which will be similar to the European Union.
The African drum is calling. Africans unite. And this is essentially what is happening in Lusaka. The establishment of the African Union marks a turning point in the history of the continent.
African Union tries to take the main focus of what the Organization of African Unity was doing, but also to incorporate the development issues, economic issues, financial issues, so that the organization can then face up to the real challenges.
These are the challenges that the new breed of African leaders are ready to take on.
So when you look at the European Union, it is a union which brings together some powerful countries, some of whom were the colonial masters in our continent, and most of whom, actually all of whom, they are economically developed, technologically advanced, and do not necessarily need the unity that they are now having. And yet they found the need for unity. So from an African perspective, as we look at the outside world, we see that really the tendency towards greater entities, the tendency towards greater integration is a universal tendency. And if there's one area which needs that unity, is Africa.
Some of the objectives of the African Union include the establishment of an African central bank, setting up a court of justice, creating an African economic and monetary union, and to create the continent's first Pan-African parliament. This is by no means an easy task.
But African leaders will have to confront new mechanisms of funding the African Union. The existing system of membership contributions will not suffice. And the idea is to appoint a committee that will investigate and present, probably first to the Council of Ministers, a number of suggestions on funding.
Another challenge facing Africa is the ongoing conflicts, which is why former President Nelson Mandela will be reporting back on progress made in the Burundi peace process. The Millennium Africa Plan, or MAP, together with Senegal's Omega Plan, will also come under the spotlight tomorrow. Some of the objectives include achieving an average growth rate of about 7%, to reduce infant and child mortality ratios by 2/3 by 2015, to provide access for all who need reproductive health services by 2015, and to enroll all children of school age in primary schools by 2015.
The plan proposed by President Thabo Mbeki, President Obasanjo and President Abdulaziz Bouteflika has been there for some time now. And this plan has been sold to a number of countries, to the international community, and the international community has been quite responsive. And so we need to build on that plan.
MAP has a chance. The international community is prepared to help Africa if Africa demonstrates its own commitment. But it's going to be a very, very long road indeed.
By now, everything's on track. It seems there'll be no turning back.
It is a turning point, but also in the world, I think it's a turning point around many issues. It's a new century, it's a new millennium. There is a new core of leadership on the continent who are really concerned about the status of the continent. And our continent needs to be restored to its former glory.
The transition from the OAU to the AU will take about 10 months. The next summit will be held in South Africa next year when the AU turns a year old. The African Renaissance now seems like a likely reality as heads of state hammer out a plan that will finally change the future of the African continent. Miranda Stradum, SABC, Lusaka, Zambia.
Tomorrow is D-Day for the Pretoria High Court to decide on the fate of illegal squatters on a farm in Bredell. Thousands of squatters moved onto the land last week after paying 25 rand to PAC authorities.
This is the 32,000 hectares of land under dispute. Land that over the past few days has become the battlefield between the Pan-Africanist Congress and the ANC government. But for the thousands who've moved here, the battle is much simpler. It's about survival, living from one day to the next. Patrick Mtsweni has lived here since 1991. A casual labourer, he makes his living by doing odd jobs on nearby farms. But his future too is inextricably linked with those who moved here over the last week. Government lawyers are meeting tonight to draft their response to claims such as his.
We have been serving a long time here, and we have been talking to them a period of 7.5 years, trying to find who's the owner of the piece of the land. They find the information for us until at this stage now you see the situation is in.
The ANC has criticised the PAC for taking advantage of poor, desperate people to score political points. The party stressed that although there remained outstanding tasks on the land issue, important progress had been made since 1994.
And for anybody who has got a genuine problem of land hunger to think that the PAC can solve their problems, when the PAC cannot solve its own problem of having a very, very insignificant presence in Parliament, I think it's an unrealistic expectation.
But what's not unrealistic, according to the thousands who've settled here, is the expectation that they have a place in which to live. But it's the manner in which the invasions were conducted that have raised serious concerns around future land distribution in the country.
I don't think this is anything like Zimbabwe. I think the nature of the land that is being occupied is very different. I think the political impetus behind it is completely different. This is not being led by the ruling party or by an organization allied to the ruling party. The government has made clear its opposition.
When the Pretoria High Court rules tomorrow, it will be a decision that will take seconds to announce, but its consequences will be felt for years. Local leaders are threatening that if the court case is not resolved tomorrow, or if those still on the waiting list do not receive land, then this plot of land behind me will be occupied. Paula Sleer, SABC, Johannesburg.
The PAC is now accusing the ANC of having been involved in a similar land invasion in the area earlier this year. It says that the ANC had also collected 12 rand a month from people squatting in the area. The PAC claims the money it's collected from the land grab in Bredell is for community use.
The PAC says it does not support the invasion, but says people are frustrated by the slow land redistribution process.
Unless we act with a little bit of speed and a little bit of compassion, we will not be able to solve anything. Confrontation is not the way to go. And if the government wants to go the route of confrontation with that community, I think they are asking for a very, very big problem. This might actually usher in a revolution in our land.
There have been reports that further PAC organized land invasions may take place in the Northern Province, Mpumalanga and the Eastern Cape, but the party denies this.
We would not be surprised if that happened, purely because of what we have said, not only now. And actually, if you go right back in Parliament, you'll find that we have been warning the government in the country that we are going to have a serious situation if nothing happens.
The PAC has not filed any legal papers, but they've indicated that party representatives will attend the court case in Pretoria tomorrow. Isaac Masemula, SABC, Pretoria.
A Klein Karoo community near Oudtshoorn, which has been living on land for decades, is fighting to stay on in their self-built stone houses and the preservation of their church building. The more than 60 families have no services, while the local Land Affairs Department is trying to interest them in a 2 million rand RDP housing scheme at a nearby settlement.
An old piece of train rail serves as the church bell. Despite the hardships, they remain faithful to their God. They belong to the Volkskerk, and the pastor comes from Oudtshoorn to bring them the gospel. The May family is one of 60 families that settled here decades ago. Nobody knows for sure how old the houses are. The cow dung floors, stone and clay walls are from a long-gone era. It is as if time stood still in Kliplukasi, just 10 kilometers from Oudtshoorn. But they say they are not wanted here anymore. The land they are living on belongs to a neighboring farmer. The Land Affairs Department is trying to get them interested in a land acquisition scheme nearby. 67-year-old Dina Fortuin says they do not want to move. Many of their loved ones are buried here. Meanwhile, they have no sanitation or electricity, and they travel on a donkey cart to fetch water. To make matters worse, the neighboring farmer put up a fence to cut off easy access to water. The water hole is now 6 kilometers away, but still they refuse to move, saying services should be provided to them where they are staying now.
To just give these people electricity and sanitation, and water. It's a very rocky area. It's going to be expensive. I would estimate, you will talk about something in the range of 6 million rand only.
People concerned about preservation of our cultural heritage visited the community to make an assessment of its historic value.
The district authority should look more seriously at the value of that space as a heritage space and also as a space to retain the self-esteem of the people.
It's a poor but a proud people that live here. Many claim to be descendants of the Khoi captain Hans Armoed, whose flocks of sheep once roamed this land called Kanaland. No eviction order has been served on the community yet. Johan Abrams, SABC, Kliplukasi.
The land invasion at Bredell this week touched a raw nerve in economic and political circles. But can it be contained, given the level of frustration that is felt by landless South Africans? To take a closer look at this issue, we are joined now by PAC Deputy President Dr. Motsoko Pheko and Dr. Sipho Sibanda, who is Director of Tenure Reform in the Department of Land Affairs. To both of you gentlemen, good evening and welcome to NewsHour.
Thank you. Thank you.
Dr. Pheko, let's start by dealing with the criticism levelled at the PAC. Criticism levelled at the PAC is as follows. The PAC is trying to score cheap political points.
I think that we should be very serious here. The land question is very fundamental to the success of this country, and it has been the primary contradiction throughout the struggle of the African people since colonial day one. The land became an issue. What you are seeing in Bredell and in many other areas is a symptom of the disease, and we must be very careful to look at the symptom instead of dealing with the disease. We have to deal with the disease. It is a fact that in this country, as early as 1913, Africans were allocated only 7% of the land.
But there is a process that is being led by government and a unit within government to lead the process of land restitution. And that program has seen the land restitution of up to 12,000 claimants.
I will tell you that that process is not going to work. There's the land restitution, the Land Restitution Act of 1994. Then there is the Constitution, paragraph, let me say section 25, subsection 7, which says people claim land from 1913. And when you are claiming land from 1913, you are really claiming nothing, because at that time the people had 7%, which was added, to which 6% was added.
But
and we have said that until
like we've seen on Bredell Farm,
the Constitution is amended, whatever is going to happen, whatever is going to be done is going to be adequate. I'll tell you, for instance, land claims. Land claims here in this country are over 63,000. Over 63,000. They have settled, they say, only 12. Now, I will go with that. By our own statistics, are about 9,000. 9,000. But they say 12,000.
Are you telling us, Dr. Pheko, that indiscriminate invasions like the one we've witnessed at Bredell are the answer to this problem?
We are actually saying that if you give people land, you are answering their problem, and you are solving the problem, and there will be nobody invading anything. We cannot expect people in a cold winter like this, with children, with old people, with expectant mothers, to be sitting there and and they have no land. But we have not said that people must grab land. And
but what about the consequences of this process, now that it has been unlawful and it has not followed procedures that are prescribed in the Constitution you talk about?
The consequences of this lies squarely with the government that is very slow in delivering land to the people.
Dr. Sibanda, government is very slow. Government has been criticized as well of not delivering adequately, speedily enough. What is government going to do to alleviate the plight of the thousands and millions of South Africans who are landless at this point in time?
Government has got a program in place to resolve the land issues. We have a land reform program that stands on 3 legs. The first leg deals with restitution. The second leg deals with redistribution. The third leg deals with land reform. It is a clearly articulated, land reform program.
But in a period of 6 years, dealing with only 12,000 out of over 60,000 claims, well articulated it may be, but well implemented it does not seem to be right now.
It does. I think we need to give government credit for the achievement it has done. Out of 67,000 claims lodged, 12,000 have been processed. Initially, it was the resolution of these claims were through the judicial process, but now we've streamlined, our processes. An administrative process has been put in place to deal with these, issues.
But clearly, the vote of no confidence is being passed on Bredell Farm and in other parts of the country where people are saying this process is not dealing with our needs. Expectations were raised, promises were made, but these have not been fulfilled.
It is not a vote of no confidence on government. For me, these are incidents orchestrated for political gain. It has nothing to do with the people rising up. Why didn't they do this in 1994?
Orchestrated by whom? We hear a claim that the ANC was also involved in a process, also on Bredell Farm or in areas surrounding there, accepting amounts of about 12 rand from people on a monthly basis so that they could be settled there. So it's not a process unique to the PAC. The ANC has been involved in it as well.
I'm not aware of that, but all I know is that the PAC, by its own admission, they've been involved supporting civic organization. If I were PAC, in the PAC leadership, I would have been on the government side to make sure that this land invasion does not take place because it frustrates government plans. We're busy now firefighting instead of concentrating on the core business of government, that of delivering land.
Now. Let's look ahead and find out what government plans to do to expedite the process. Criticism is leveled at government, saying that there's not enough capacity to deal with the situation of land restitution and so on. There's not enough money to pay the sellers in situations of a willing seller and willing buyer basis. What is government planning to do to expedite the process?
The Department of Land Affairs is not alone delivering land. The issue here, the land occupation at Bredell, farm, is a housing issue. If the PAC was concerned with the housing needs of the people, they could have gone to the Department of Housing to see the minister dealing with the housing, needs. They could have been heard. Similarly, the Department of Land Affairs program on redistribution has a settlement component dealing with residential needs of people who are landless. The programs are in place. All the PAC and others,
But clearly there are parties, there are sectors of our community who are dissatisfied with the process as it has worked up to this point. They are calling for a much more expeditious process of dealing with their concerns and their claims. What is government looking to do to make this process deliver faster than it has been up to this point?
A lot of resources are being put into the 3 programs to make sure that we deliver speedily. And I want to reject, arguments that seem to say the people are impatient. Yes, people are impatient, but there is a force that seeks to, whip people's emotions for political gain.
Tomorrow, if the court case is given, or the decision in the court case is given in favor of government and people removed from the land on Bredell, has government made alternative provisions for these people?
No, they came from somewhere. These people must have come from somewhere. They were not completely destitute. They came from somewhere. All government is requiring them to do is to go back from where they came from, so that from there, the government will have to prioritize everybody's needs that, need to be prioritized.
Dr. Peko, what is the PAC's plan? Tomorrow, if the decision is given against the people on Bredell Farm, what does the PAC propose to do to deal with that situation?
First of all, let me say that I was in this place yesterday, and it's a pity that I did not have the time to do the photocopies because I could not remove these forms that they have. Some people have been there as early as 1996. So it's really propaganda to say that people have come from elsewhere. Why would people come from elsewhere in this cold weather? Anyway, our position here is that when the West come to the West, all that we are pleading for the people is that they must be given alternative accommodation, and we think that this is within the limits of Section 26
but
of
has
the
the PAC
Constitution.
Provided any alternative?
We are not the government.
So
we
no
are saying that people must be given the land, and these people have said that once we have given us land, we can build for ourselves. We don't even need the government to build houses for ourselves. That's what the people are saying.
One of the founding principles of the Millennium Africa Recovery Plan is the rule of law. Rule of law must be upheld. The rule of law must be respected in all African countries. Now, how do you see this latest development on Bredell Farm impacting on the greater vision of the Millennium Africa Recovery Plan?
Well, first of all, let me say that the rule of law cannot operate in a vacuum where there's a violation of human rights. I mean, if people have nowhere to sleep, and I think if you look at that Section 26 of the Constitution, and in fact, even just logically, you will find that it is important that at least people must have a home. It's a basic thing.
Just in conclusion, the order given tomorrow saying that if the people are forced to move off their land and they refuse to move, is government prepared to resort to violence in that situation?
Well, government will have to consider alternative means of making sure that the land, the people are taken care of elsewhere and not on that land. And as far as means of violence is concerned, I'm not sure government is going to do that.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sipho Sibanda from the Department of Land Affairs and Dr. Motsoko Peko from the Pan-Africanist Congress. Nadia?
Thanks for you. The removal of the first group of the Chapila community near Potgietersrus to their new settlement at Sterkwater has been suspended because of protest action by residents. The protesters say the removal was not sanctioned by the community. Anglo Platinum has allocated an amount in excess of 100 million rand for the relocation process. Villagers are being moved because of exposure to blasting operations as they are too near the open cast mine. After prolonged negotiations between the mine, the villagers and other stakeholders within the community, it was finally decided that the community be relocated. The mine will build houses, provide infrastructure, transport, schools, churches and other essential structures in Sterkwater. The community want the agreement reviewed and want to reach a consensus on the removal.
When News Hour continues, an Afrikaans church shows a colored family the door. Stay tuned.
What happened to an Irish superhero from the planet Ultron?
Sleep, sleep.
Falls in love with a human nurse from the planet Earth.
Living with a superhero, a complete guide to relationships between humans and Ultrons.
Can romance ever blossom?
Sorry.
Join my hero on Sunday, 15 July for comedy that's out of this world.
My aim? Targeting wrinkles, firmer skin.
So L'Oreal have created new improved Revitalift. Now, pro-retinol A is encapsulated in nanosomes designed to target where wrinkles need it most. In 4 weeks, Revitalift reduces not only the appearance of even the most visible wrinkles, but also leaves your skin firmer.
I see fewer wrinkles, firmer skin. Objective achieved.
New improved Revitalift from L'Oreal Plenitude.
L'Oreal, 'cause I'm worth it.
I refuse to be explicit.
Nobody's talking explicit, just X.
I know I was married to your brother, but I happen to love Lionel.
Of course you do.
And he loves me.
Yes, of course he does.
So everything's fine.
Yes, of course it is.
Guess you've forgotten he tried to seduce you the first time he met you.
He didn't try very hard.
Well, he still tried.
If things had gone on from there, he might have ended up calling you Mum.
Judi Dench stars in As Time Goes By, starting Sunday the 15th of July.
This Tuesday on Special Assignment, the hidden world of a Cape Town crack house.
I mean, anybody that's dealing with things like drugs, they're heavies, you know? And if you're going to put them in danger, it's nothing to have you killed.
A teenage dealer, a drug kingpin, and the dark places where they trade. Special Assignment, Tuesday at 9:30 on SABC 3.
The Manuals of Cape Town, who are the centre of a racial incident, attended a new church this morning and say they've forgiven another church for insulting them. A few weeks ago, the coloured family was asked to leave the Afrikaanse Protestantse Kerk in Goodwood by two churchgoers who said they were not welcome at the service.
Charmaine Manuel, her 13-year-old son Nigel and his grandmother Rachel Bekus were welcomed into the lively fold of the Maranatha Pentecostal Church at Goodwood this morning. A few Sundays ago, they tried to attend a service at the Afrikaans Protestantse Kerk in the neighbourhood where they just settled, but were asked to leave. Mrs. Manuel said she wasn't told outright that they were not welcome because they're coloured, but she interpreted it as a racial insult. She's found a new church and forgave those who insulted her.
I do forgive them for what they've done to us, but feeling very disappointed, but I know that in deep down in my heart I have forgiven Mr. Nurking.
Pastor Marius Viljoen said they were not trying to make a political statement by inviting the rejected church members, but believe that racial intolerance has no place in South Africa.
Because our country doesn't need this type of thing. There has to be reconciliation. We are South Africans, never mind what our colour or our race is. And we must learn to work together and serve God together.
Only a few street blocks away at the Protestantse Church, nothing had changed. Chairperson of the Church Council, Samuel Botha, confirmed that he was supported by his congregation in turning away the coloured family from worshipping at their services. Botha says he's aggrieved that the incident has become a political issue, but said their church had the right to choose their followers, who should be Afrikaans-speaking as well as white. The Afrikaanse Protestantse Church broke away from mainstream Afrikaans churches some years ago because they wanted to remain all white.
Our church is active among white Afrikaners. That does not make us racist, but we do want to hold our public church services among our own culture group. And one of the characteristics of this culture group is that it is white.
Een van die aspekte van my kultuurgroep waarin ek behoort is dat ons blankes is.
Political parties have entered the fray. ANC members in the neighbourhood attended the Protestant church meeting to express their protest. The DA, in its reaction to the incident, says Western Cape Premier Gerald Morkel has entered into correspondence with the church and will hold follow-up discussions. But neighbours who have no political affiliation and are members of the Anglican Church also attended the church meeting to see what would happen. They were not expelled, but certainly felt very unwelcome.
Yes, I'm insulted by it because I am a so-called coloured. So I'm insulted by it. I don't think it's right at all. I mean, if they are so-called Christians, they shouldn't be putting people out of their church. Everybody should be welcome.
I'd rather go to my grandma's church, yes, and allow anybody to come in.
The question which remains is whether a church has the right under the new South African Constitution to turn away any worshipper from its doors. Shalpo, SABC, Goodwood.
Academics and political analysts say efforts need to be made to eradicate racism, which is still manifesting itself in many ways in this country.
This emerged from a four-day conference entitled The Burden of Race, Whiteness and Blackness in Modern South Africa. The conference was organised by the University of the Witwatersrand.
The conference was attended by 200 delegates and speakers from South Africa and abroad. Topics such as politics of race and ethnicity, categorizing race, and affirmative action were discussed. Steve Biko Foundation Director Dr. Xolela Mangu says race is not necessarily a bad thing, but South Africans need to acknowledge, tolerate, and respect their diversities. He stressed that debates on issues of race should be taken from conferences to the broader public, especially school.
The real challenge is how do we interpret our racial identities in ways that are positive? How do we give to black kids a positive notion about their identities? And how do we give to white children a new meaning of whiteness?
Speaking on affirmative action, SABC board chairperson Dr. Vincent Mapai said it was necessary to redress the imbalances of the past. He believes that existing legislation needs to be enforced.
Above all, the people who have been traditionally excluded, blacks, women, and the disabled, need also to use the opportunity to empower themselves even much more than they have done before in order to be competitive in these positions.
South Africa will host an 8-day World Conference Against Racism in Durban at the end of August this year. Zamazondo, SABC, Johannesburg.
Now, news making headlines in other parts of the world. The industrial city of Bradford in northern England has suffered some of the worst racial violence seen in Britain in years. Asian and white youths armed with a variety of weapons have clashed with police in renewed rioting that has left more than 100 police officers injured.
Bradford is the fourth northern city to be hit by race riots in recent weeks after similar incidents in Oldham, Leeds and Burnley. At least 2 youths were stabbed and 28 people arrested during the street battles blamed by community leaders on outside instigators.
West Yorkshire police officers have come under repeated attack from missiles including crossbows, flares, sledgehammers and petrol bombs. More than 120 of our officers have been injured, many returning to the streets after being treated in hospital.
The Bradford clashes came after the right-wing National Front announced it would hold a rally at the town, 320 kilometres north of London. A police horse was stabbed, joyriders drove stolen cars into police lines and buildings were set alight.
The severity of the disorder and the violence has been shocking. In one of the worst incidents, the Manningham Ward Labour Club was set on fire, with people inside and burning cars placed against the fire doors of that building. The fire service cleared a route to enable those inside to get out safely.
The police say at one point they were close to being overwhelmed by the rioters.
The Drum Cree Sunday March by Protestant Orange Order, parading victories over Catholics, has taken place peacefully amid massive security and heightened tensions. They marched today from the northern Irish town of Portadown to a flashpoint 2 miles away at Drum Cree, where British forces were blocking their path. They mounted a massive security operation to prevent confrontations as troops and police erected barricades to enforce the ban, preventing Protestants from marching through the Catholic area. COSATU will be meeting with Zimbabwe's Labour Minister later this month to discuss how the Zimbabwean government views trade unions in that country.
COSATU's Secretary-General Zwelinzi Mavavi appeared on Newsmaker earlier today and spoke about several issues facing Zimbabwe, which were cause for concern for COSATU.
Last week, the Zimbabwean Congress of Trade Unions embarked on a 2-day strike to protest against the government's recent fuel hike. The Federation's South African counterpart, COSATU, came out in support of the strike. Today on Newsmakers, COSATU was once again behind the country's trade unions.
We have been concerned, we have raised concerns publicly as COSATU about what appears to be a deliberate strategy on the part of the government of Zimbabwe to sideline and try to make their unions irrelevant by sponsoring the so-called war veterans to go into the factories under the disguise of solving labor disputes that have been outstanding.
Zimbabwe is due to hold presidential elections next year. Last year, thousands of white-owned farms were illegally occupied by war veterans and ruling party militants just before parliamentary elections. At least 40 people were killed in pre-election violence.
We have made this call as the Southern African Trade Union Coordinating Council to our governments in the Southern African continent that we now require their decisive interventions to ensure that there is free and fair elections in Zimbabwe.
Zimbabwe is facing its biggest political and economic crisis since independence. There is a fuel shortage and the foreign currency reserves have run out. COSATU is worried that if SADC doesn't do something soon, the situation in Zimbabwe will get worse. Sandy McCowan, SABC News Desk.
Well, coming up after the break, life returns to normal in Grahamstown. Stay tuned.
not asked to be here, but now we're here. A word in your ear. We don't want your sympathy. We're stronger than you think. We can do without cynicism, indifference, and abuse. We are children. Don't treat us like kids. You were once us. Give us the chance to become you.
If you feel that life has more to offer, watch Entertainment, the all-new alternative lifestyle show that looks at love, life, art, health, spirituality, sexuality, extreme sport, and so much more. Join us every Tuesday at 10 p.m. on 3 from July 10th and find out how much you have to offer life.
Miranda has commitment issues. Samantha learns that with the right PA, office politics can be fun. Charlotte's into gender bending. And Carrie's new boyfriend is different.
He's a bisexual. I'm a trisexual. I'll try anything once.
I'm very into labels. Gay, straight. Pick a side and stay there.
Sex and the City, Wednesday at 10 on 3.
NewsHour continues, and a Hout Bay businessman is raising money for the police. Gavin Cosgrove claims to have raised more than R1 million for the force, but not everyone is impressed.
He describes himself as a man with a mission. Gavin Cosgrove aims to raise thousands for the under-resourced police force. He set up a telemarketing firm to raise money. The Hout Bay police station has received a facelift since the SABC support launch in April. But Cosgrove's fundraising efforts come at a price. Only 56 cents of every rand raised goes into the police coffers.
To raise the sort of funds that we need, you have to do it professionally. You have to do it under strict business lines. And we have to employ people to do that.
But not everyone agrees.
If I'm going to give money to a good cause, I would like to be told that I'm actually giving money to the good cause and not to someone else who may determine whether or not to pass that money on.
Police say anyone is welcome to donate money to the force, but they have to adhere to rules and regulations.
He is not entitled to raise funds on behalf of the police. In fact, nobody is entitled to raise funds on behalf of the police. Our budget is allocated according to our priorities, both national and provincial. We have furthermore informed him that any attempt by him or by the trust which is driving this project to utilize the police's name, emblem, logo is unlawful.
These concerns have been raised with Cosgrove, but he claims he simply wants to improve the lot of the police and is planning to expand his project to other police stations. Crystal Audison, SABC, Hout Bay.
To KwaZulu-Natal now, where the IFP's three-day national conference at Ulundi in the north of the province ended today. Party delegates committed themselves to good governance, socio-economic development, and a total intolerance of corruption and other malpractices. Hundreds of delegates from around the country attended, condemning the killing of farmers and land invasions. IFP followers were asked to work within the structures of the party and directly involve themselves in community development projects. They were called on to ensure that elected representatives were accountable for their actions. IFP leaders and officials were warned that any involvement in malpractice and corruption will lead to immediate sanction and expulsion.
The Methodist Church's week-long conference in Port Elizabeth has come to an end. At the conference today, former President Nelson Mandela saluted the church and its leaders for their role in educating the nation during the country's apartheid days. He called on the church to now change its focus to fighting poverty on the African continent.
Mandela today paid a short visit to Port Elizabeth to close a week-long Methodist Church conference. Accompanied by his wife, Gracia Machel, Mandela called on the church to take the lead in the fight against poverty and HIV/AIDS.
A poor person cannot go to school. He
he cannot send his or her children to school. He is unable to provide shelter for her beloveds, unable to send her children to the best schools in the country. It is one of the greatest assaults on human dignity. And as long as there's poverty anywhere in the world, we are not truly liberated.
29 Methodist ministers were ordained during the ceremony. Over 500 delegates from Zimbabwe, New Zealand, Great Britain and Nigeria attended the week-long conference. Afterwards, Mandela left for Lusaka to join President Mbeki and other African leaders at the OAU summit. Luzuko Koti, SABC, Port Elizabeth.
This weekend saw the end of the annual National Arts Festival in Grahamstown. Organizers have hailed the event a success, trumpeting an increase in ticket sales as proof of its growth. But looking at some of the productions staged and audiences, a lot still needs to be done.
Musician Robin All's message is simple. The arts and the corporate community can work together. And over the next few months, audiences can hope the events organizing committee successfully sells this message following the withdrawal of Standard Bank as the event's main sponsor.
In my opinion, there's still lots of work to be done. Still have a long way to go. We need sponsorship. We need lots of backing.
The bank now only wants to fund jazz. This program has been one of the most inspiring. Take its youth component. There was an overwhelming response, with many young musicians from all over the country taking part in workshops led by some of South Africa's leading educators. Artistically, some exhibitions did not shirk their responsibility to reflect society. Take Willie Bester's interpretation of the recent police attack on immigrants. But theatrically, many messages lacked the creative edge, whether it be on the main stage or this fringe piece.
I think the play is the festival is disappointing because there's not more about some of the burning issues, such as the AIDS question, such as war and conflict, such as crime. There's very little representation or portrayal from an artistic point of view of those questions.
Outside as well as inside the theatres and dance halls, it's the same old new South Africa. The message from Grahamstown is that transformation takes time.
What would be wonderful is that if on our stages and in the auditoriums, the demographics of South Africa were present at all times. And we haven't achieved that yet, but I think we're on the way. If you go back to before I started here, or when I started here, if you like, that wasn't the case.
As the music stops, the lights and applause fades, this corner of the country called Geni retreats from the cold, leaving hope that next year sponsors are as visible as transformation is slow. Deboho Alexander, SABC Arts in Grahamstown.
Coming up, the other important news of the day, will Sadfu shake off its elitist image and win the hearts of all South Africans? For this story and others, stay tuned.
While Rachel looks for clues to a series of murders, one of her colleagues battles his own private demons, and the cracks begin to show.
George, take a breath. Seems like he's just going wherever the next train takes him.
Looking for the truth behind another lie.
I know that when someone knocks on your door at 3:30 in the morning to tell you nothing, I know that there's a problem.
Will George come clean? Profiler, Tuesday at 8:30.
Tell us about the arms trade.
I've seen a lot of what it's responsible for.
Tell your brother to keep his mouth shut. I won't be able to stop him.
I have a worker, a close friend who may be about to be killed by these people, and you're accusing me of supplying arms to them?
What does Kamara want?
Shooting. preferably with one of those weapons he's after.
It is illegal for anyone to sell you arms. Nothing is illegal if the British government decide to do it.
Arms for hostages in the Knock, Friday at 8:30.
After 18 years behind